happy to welcome you to this session and wanted to give our gratitude to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for their support. At this point, I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Tapiwa Nyasulu.
I would like to really thank Women World Banking, the Bill Gates Foundation, UNCDF, and all the partners that have made it possible for all of us to be here. And I'm glad to see, happy faces in the room, because I know that we're actually doing the right thing for our women and girls out there. And as already introduced, I'm Tapiwa, and I'm heading the Women and Gender Policy and Development at the African Union Commission. And it's really glad to see like-minded people being in the same space, discussing and trying to ensure that, well, we do have financial and economic inclusion in our spaces out there for our women and girls all together. Well, let me start by welcoming you to our beautiful city, Ethiopia. This Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. We are leveraging on the existing platforms and networks and initiatives and programs. So what you're doing and contributing at your corner will be contributing to unlocking that $100 billion for the women. So you are doing the right thing by being part and parcel of the community of driving the financial inclusion agenda across the continent, even globally as well. Lastly, we're excited to hear various perspectives from the global and regional levels, as well as two interesting case studies from Ethiopia and Indonesia that I'm eagerly waiting to listen to, that we can learn, so that we're able to cascade down, learning for our African continent as well. And this is home to the two local coalitions that are part of the Women's Digital Financial Inclusion Advocacy Hub. With these few remarks, I don't know whether there were few, but I would like to say thank you so much. I'm inspired. I'm ready to listen and learn much more from you. All the best. Thank you.
I'd like to welcome Yasmin Bin Humam, who's a financial sector specialist from CGAP, the consultative group to assist the poor, which is housed at the World Bank Group. Welcome. Just grab whatever seat. Yep. And then also I'd like to welcome Shifra Shisa, Director of Programs from the Graça Machel Trust. Please join us as well. Thank you. I'll start with a couple of questions. We're meaning this to be kind of like a fireside chat, an intimate discussion, and then afterwards we'll have a few questions and answers from the audience. So I'll start with kind of the barriers to women's digital financial inclusion. And Yasmin, I'd like to ask you, what are the infrastructure barriers that contribute to this persistent gender gap that we've seen in women's financial inclusion?
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here with all of you, and I'm always learning as well. So great to hear from the previous panelists.
Thank you. I think maybe as I respond, just to share that the Graça Machel Trust experience comes from the work that is being done by our networks. So the networks are based in 18 countries, and also we've got networks in finance, which is we call New Faces, New Voices, networks in agriculture, which we call NABU, and then we've got networks in business, which are women in business, as well as green energy, and networks in media. And really they give us a rich experience of the grassroots experience and understanding of the issues that are facing women within financial inclusion. I'm going to mention just about 5 of our areas where we find that there's barriers and also social norms that relate to those barriers. Our networks work closely with these women, and also they look at informal and formal barriers to bridge the gap for women in financial inclusion. The first one being the lack of sex disaggregated data on women SMEs. We've seen that in available initiatives targeting financial inclusion women at country as well as regional level. We only have continental data. We do not have national data, so that we can be able to use that data. But we also not have sufficient national, worldwide, and regional blocks data on how many women need to be targeted in digital financial inclusion. So those are some of the challenges that we face. For example, according to the World Economic Forum, women, I think it was mentioned by Tapiwa this morning, Dr. Tapiwa, that women account for 58% of self-employment across the continent and contribute approximately 13% to Africa's gross domestic product. The entrepreneurial spirit of women and youth has left noteworthy imprint on the Africa's business landscape. And the World Bank also says, African Development Bank also says 13 million formal and informal small business size entrepreneurs, with one or more being women. So we do have the stats on where we sit, where we are represented. We are considered the backbone of Africa's economy, and with most of the concentration in agriculture, manufacturing, and other sectors, which we find as we train our women entrepreneurs within the Graça Machel Trust. And also about 50 to 60% of total intra-Africa trade, which is informal cross-border trading, as we know. And food and agriculture argue that up to 70% of informal cross-border traders on the continent are women. Now that is what we are facing, but we still do not have, as I've mentioned, the statistics that is actually giving us the national understanding of where we are. A case in point for us is New Faces, New Voices Zimbabwe, which is a groundbreaking contribution to women's financial inclusion. In 2012, they looked at pioneering the research, and in collaboration with Finmark Trust, GIZ, and ICC Mozambique, funded by the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, the New Faces undertook a comprehensive study to this data. And available for evidence-based initiative targeted women SMEs in Zimbabwe, the study marked the first in Zimbabwe sex-specific data, a research conducted by the New Faces, New Voices. And the availability of this data empowered the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe and other financial institutions to develop targeted initiatives and financial products supported by women entrepreneurs in that country. So this also led to the New Faces, New Voices strategic alliance with them, and led to the, I think you mentioned about 138 countries do not have a financial inclusion strategy. So this led to Zimbabwe's financial inclusion strategy. And the work we did as well from 2018 as GMT with SADC led to the development and of the draft financial inclusion strategy. So it really shows us that when we have this information and we have this data, it helps us to be able to do that. The second one, I think it has been mentioned, the unbanked women SMEs and the population of the unbanked, and the statistics have been shared, I won't repeat that. But we look at what are the social barriers that impact women. In one country, we know that women have to get a consent of the husband to open a bank account. In other countries, a woman has a bank account, but they cannot use it in front of their husband, or their husband need to give consent for them to use a bank account. So a number of aspects and issues that really prevent women to do that. But again, I just want to share, I haven't been looking at you, so, so wave. So
that's our timekeeper that she's
yes.
referring to for anyone in the audience.
So just 2013, 2015, and our New Faces, New Voices Uganda chair is here with us, Dr. Theo. Uganda developed and implemented a cooperative financial model in Lwengo and Gomba, and please, if you want more information, she will give that, called FinSafe. And we like to give this information because the model was aimed at improving financial inclusion for rural communities in Uganda. And based on the participatory approach of New Faces, New Voices, Uganda engaged these community leaders in developing a tailored, specific curriculum-based needs and identified by entrepreneurs in targeted districts. So this curriculum looked at business and financial literacy, and training sessions were conducted from village to village. We've done the same in Lesotho. Once the training was completed, smaller groups were formed and savings clubs were established. But the most important thing, and the women were encouraged to save just about 1,000 Ugandan shillings. The intervention saw an increase in community members' savings culture, and outcomes of this presented the financial institution a compelling case to support these rural entrepreneurs in 2 districts. So the Savings Club records served as an evidence for Uganda. The network presented a compelling case to Finance Trust Bank on the potential of setting up a bank in the district and served as unbanked. So the impact of this initiative was immediately felt. Savings collaboration, and I think the most important thing that came out of these is that there were loans that were granted to small businesses, but the one thing that Uganda, I think for me, was really impressive was that utilizing these savings, the bank was able to grant individual loans for solar lighting. And as a result, children were able to study longer at night. The community members felt less intimidated and had better understanding of their rights. The impact of the program went beyond the individuals with access on financial accounts, and this had a ripple effect empowering the communities. So this is one of the areas where we see with our networks that have the understanding of what is required village to village of this information. And again, New Faces, New Voices Uganda copyrighted the FinSave model. And I think Dr. Theo again can share with you what that is all about. The New Faces Uganda chapter and the FinSave project in partnership with the Uganda National Entrepreneurship Development Institute under the Investment Village Banking Savings. And about over 250,000 people were able to, which 60% were women through this intervention, which was piloted again in Lwengo, gain knowledge about banking services. So it just shows you that when there is that understanding, when women are held and assisted, they are able to achieve all this through the work that they do. The other two is limited knowledge on financial literacy. I've mentioned that, and I've mentioned what we've done. Again, Uganda, I think case in point, they implemented a financial literacy program. Zimbabwe implemented that with Old Mutual. Lesotho, we've implemented that in partnership with CARE. So really, it just shows you that this is required by the women. And just one last case for me is Esther, who is based in, now this is from the GMT perspective, from a program called Women Creating Wealth, where we looked at capacity building. We then do a 360 and look at access to markets and access to finance. From the capacity building, we had a woman in Tanzania who founded her business in 2011, and she had a turnover of about $30,000 per annum. And after going through the program and assisted, she's now sitting at 1.5 million per annum, and from 4 employees to 42 direct employees through the program that assisted her. And she's looking at about 2 to 5 million in the next 2 years. So really just showing what this does when we really are concentrating and looking at women. And women still have the challenge, though, of, I think the last one, of owning property. I was in Eastern Cape in the last week in South Africa, and women were saying only when you are married that you are considered by the chief to own land. So women cannot own land. And then you get your husband writing a support letter. There are policies in South Africa supporting rights to land. But even though there are policies, there are traditional leaders locally that have a different view of what is being done. So I think in our view, the last one is Women's Leadership and Economic Recovery Task Force, which we started with GMT, with the ELG, and looking at how many women are represented within this task force. And about 30% of women were represented, but still we saw that even though women were the most, were hit the hardest by COVID-19, they didn't have representation, they did not understand what is required, and they do not have the support to proceed. So those are some of the areas where as GMT we've seen in different 18 countries, and we have a women's leadership and financial inclusion in 11 countries where the barriers are as far as women are concerned.
All right, that's wonderful to hear. And what stuck with me, Shifra, when you're talking about this is these you call them ripple effects. Some people call them downstream effects. You were talking about the embedded finance models for solar lighting, right? And when you have communities that are maybe off the grid, they have inconsistent access to electricity, when you do bring in things like solar and they have the finances to bring that, it improves education because children are able to study later in the evening, after dark. It increases productivity. Entrepreneurs are able to work later hours because they have lighting. It really helps with safety, right? A lot of times you have women going out in the dark and they're subject to sexual assault, other crimes. And so we think about just how many downstream effects there are just from getting the access to finance to be able to fund innovations like solar lighting. So we've talked a bit about these barriers. I think, Shifra, you already mentioned some of this in your comments, but so I'll ask you, Yasmin, are there any existing policies or mechanics of existing policy frameworks that you think are impeding or leading to some of these barriers?
Well, I think it's a very general answer,
Yes.
but sort of the notion that you can be inclusive of women without doing a gendered analysis is something that I've heard before. Sort of, we would like to benefit everyone, and so we don't want to single out women. But again, women are 50% of the population, and we find that across categories, rural, youth, sort of name your demographic, consistently women are underserved, even across those areas. So I think we really need the data. You mentioned data initiatives, and I think we'll probably speak more about that later. But a policy approach that can still train a lens on various segments, but understands the gender dynamics that are pervasive and that are causing women to be consistently marginalized across these demographics is crucial.
All right. Thank you. So we spoke a bit about some of the barriers. Let's move on to some of the policy opportunities for women's digital financial inclusion. Shifra, you have dual roles because I know you're also president and co-founder of the African Women in Business Association. What emerging opportunities do you see for leveraging digital technologies to empower women entrepreneurs, and how can supportive policy environments help facilitate this?
So I think if we look at the increased partnerships between bank and MSMEs, and as I've said that at the Graça Machel Trust, we look at that 360, meaning access to finance with capacity building. The fact that financial institutions, I think, are able to support the potential markets with the unbanked population in the continent means that there's room to build more of the capacity, and these groups are not only access to finance opportunities and financial literacy, but also business development skills. So there is that relationship, doing business with technology innovations such as cashless mobile money, money transfers, and mobile banking. And also the presence of the national, I think that was mentioned earlier on, of the national financial inclusion policy strategies. For us, that is key. It means that there's political goodwill, because there are some that are there. Tanzania, for example, we've got the financial inclusion strategy in some of the other countries. There's political goodwill and multi-stakeholder interest to promote this, I think, convergence in traditional financial infrastructure. The modern technology-driven infrastructure, which is what we know, really support women entrepreneurs, and for us to be able to see the difference that we want and the input that we want supported by policy. And lastly, the intervention of regional women-focused initiatives such as the African Development Bank AFAWA, that is looking now at 50 million women speak program and help to reduce 42% of that financing gap that was mentioned when we started among women in the continent, but also helping women to explore the non-conventional markets through technology. So that is very important. These are initiatives that also help to place women in the front lines and deciding how the financial pipeline should look like when we are looking at the financial pipeline, and also when we're looking at assisting our women in these structures. And lastly, the emergence of the non-conventional women centered with, in our space, with the Gender Lens Investment Fund. The GMT invested in the AfriShella, which is a Pan-African Gender Lens Investment Fund, and it also focused on the crucial elements because it's putting forward the economic equity for women. And it's looking at, the fund addresses the discriminatory process that have resulted in difficulties for African women to access finance. So GMT looks at this and do this by looking at crucial and establishing a platform and channel to ensure that there's capital that is going to women-led businesses. In South Africa, through the African Women in Business, which I'm president of, government is supporting the cooperative banks, so that there's funding that is being channeled to women. And as African Women in Business, we are one of those that are looking at the cooperative bank as one of the ways to assist women.
Thank you so much, Shifra. It was so great that you talked about gender lens investing. Women's World Banking has our Women's World Banking Asset Management division, and we now have 2, and we're starting fundraising for a 3rd fund. But it's so amazing to see that when you're investing in organizations that have a commitment to serving women as customers, a commitment to keeping women in leadership positions, you really start to see that change on the systemic level. And the investors, to me, are the funders. They are the people who are investing capital, providing equity, debt. That whole ecosystem needs to really work together to ensure that you have the necessary capital to be able to lend and so forth. Yasmin, you've done a lot of research and policy work at CGAP and in your prior jobs as well. What promising trends or innovations have you seen in digital finance specifically that you think hold the most potential for narrowing this gender gap that we've seen? And then how can policymakers proactively support and promote these developments through policy initiatives?
Yeah, one thing that I'm holding out a lot of hope for is this notion of embedded finance, sort of financial services embedded in other, services and use cases. Now, of course, for that to really be a reality, we need a digital infrastructure, and we need gender equitable access to, this digital infrastructure. But I actually think that embedded finance will help to drive more women to have phones, more women to seek out use of the internet and things like that, because it is such a compelling use case for women. We need to ground our work with women in the use case. This is not charity work, right? These are economic drivers of the economy. They are, women in business. They are running things. They are working hard. They are supporting others within their families and employing others. And so, if you think of and actually Indonesia has some great examples of embedded finance in large platforms. You think of a woman who, does house cleaning or personal service, if she can get onto a platform and have people book her services in that way, but then also pay her through that platform, suddenly she has an income trail. Suddenly she has a relationship with a financial institution that's either, depending on how that platform is licensed, a fintech or a bank that's on the back end. She's now visible to the financial sector. This can form the foundation for non-collateralized lending. If you say, my gosh, look at your client base, it's so large, or, oh my gosh, you've been in business for, 5 years on this platform, or whatever you might have it. I really just think that this embedded finance in platforms is such an opportunity, but not just in urban areas, in rural areas as well, if we can get to the connectivity levels that we need. You think about women looking at, the prices of seeds and agricultural inputs. We know that women are agriculturally active. If they go to a platform that gives them that information and then can buy those inputs directly from that platform or gain credit from that platform, or even perhaps, sell it to the person who's going to take it to market for them through that platform. It's the opportunity. It opens the door for credit. It also opens the opportunity for them to have digital wallets, because women don't just engage financially, professionally through their jobs. They're often a financial center of their household. They are this node for many family members, be it children, aunts, whoever. They are managing finances and sending and receiving money to and from people. How can policy enable this? Definitely need, someone mentioned earlier the notion of, open banking. That's, a crucial component, and, so that the fintechs and the banks and the platforms can share this data, amongst themselves. But at the same time, it needs to be responsible, right? The moment you've given your information to a platform and they've sold it to a third party, and now you're either being harassed, or there were hidden fees that you didn't see, the trust is just gone, and it's incredibly hard to build that. So it's incumbent upon policymakers to have the market conduct supervision in place and the regulation in place to ensure that this evolves responsibly.
I got really excited when you talked about the use cases, right? Because what we've seen in some markets, access to financial services is a challenge, but in other markets, take India and Indonesia, for example, they have very high rates of access, but usage is sometimes a challenge. You have dormant accounts, and then that ends up being a drag on the P&Ls for financial services providers. So it's in their best interest to have active customers, you have cross-sell opportunities, and you're engaging your customers. And so I think the use cases are really important, and it serves as an on-ramp into that formal financial system. I loved hearing about the consumer protection, so from the policymaker's perspective, but even for financial services providers, how do you design consumer protection into your products, and then also the channels through which you deliver those services? Great. So I'll move us to the last kind of section of this discussion, and I'd like to think about kind of just solutions and best practices for inclusive policy. Yasmin, you've mentioned emphasizing the importance of gender disaggregated data and gender transformative approaches in policymaking. Could you share a couple of examples of how these principles have been integrated and into the policy design and the implementation to enhance women's financial inclusion outcomes?
Yeah, I wanna start by actually defining, when we say gender transformational policy, we are talking about actually like a paradigm shift. We're talking about policy that transforms the relationships that financial service providers have with their customers, that transforms their perceptions of women, that empowers, that's really empowerment, and it's a change in the status quo. That's what we mean by gender transformational policy. And with, gender disaggregated data, similarly, it's not just a matter of the data points that we have and then looking at them by gender, men, women, non-binary, that's a part of it. But it's so much more than that. It's, about looking at the relevant data points that are relevant to women's lives. Are there microinsurance products for complications in pregnancy? Are there, what are women's needs and how are those being served? What are the complaints that women are making against their financial service providers? All these kinds of things factor into gender data and then can inform the policies that will, transform it. I think we're still in the early stages of these explorations, but one thing where we've made progress, you mentioned national financial inclusion strategies, only 15 have measurable targets for women's financial inclusion. But I think setting ambitious targets in national financial inclusion strategies is a first step on that journey to being transformational, because it's a sign that we're measuring the status quo, and how it's going to change. So I'm hopeful that we're moving in the right direction on this topic.
No, that's great. It's not just collecting the data, but then what do you do with it, and then how do you use that to get positive outcomes? That's really helpful. Thank you, Yasmin. So to close out, I will mention what I'm sure all of you are aware of, an African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that really embodies the spirit of what we're doing here with the coalitions. In that vein, a question, I guess, for both of you is, if you had to distill our discussion today into one actionable priority for the audience to influence inclusive policy for women's digital financial inclusion, what would it be? Because we want to make sure this is not just about a talking, but we want to make sure that all of you have one or two actions that you can take home and next week start to implement in your own work. And so what takeaway or action would you believe each attendee should prioritize and take forward?
So maybe I'll just touching on the consumer protection. I just wanted to mention that there's a beautiful project that Uganda is doing, which is looking at the Citizens Financial Reference Bureau. And it's looking at consumer information gaps that are needed along the financial value chain, and working with the Minister of Finance to see those gaps and educate the consumers. Again, Dr. Theo is here to talk more about that, but it's just something that we can look at and reference and see where they are in that process. But I also just, in response to your question, just mention what Mrs. Machel always say, that we will not achieve anything with 100 fragmented voices. We need a movement for us to be able to achieve what we are doing. And I like what we're doing, what the AU is doing with Wi-Fi, because it's going to look at financial inclusion, but amplifying every single effort that each organization is doing to achieve financial inclusion, and collectively together to be able to raise the 100 billion and reach the 10 million women by 2030. It was 10 years, it's now 6 more years, Dr. Tapiwa, so we don't have much time. So digital financial inclusion has really great potential for us to assist in narrowing the gap and the financing gender gap, in addressing the barriers and creating a fair and enabling environment and essential, as well as effective advocacy requirements, as well as evidence-based work that we've spoken about, research, as well as navigate social and cultural barriers for women, but opportunities for women-led and women-owned entrepreneurs to be financially included, such as credit and capital, digital and micro lending that we've spoken about, crowdfunding, digital credit, as well as online digital financial literacy and training and education, amongst others. These interoperable digital platforms to create trading opportunities for women, and also across border and open opportunities for women's financial inclusion are prerequisites that are required. And lastly, key enablers for the digital finance, include investment in the necessary infrastructure, which I think you've spoken about that, expansion of connectivities and mobile coverage, you've spoken about that, and the affordable smartphones for wider adoption, supportive policies and frameworks, which I think the AU has spoken about, and some that we've touched on, that really encourage the need for innovation and foster collaboration amongst stakeholders, I think would be able to help and get us and move us forward.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, my message to those of you assembled here is really just to quote the opening remarks, knowledge is powerful. And you all have the knowledge. You have so much knowledge. So please continue to, shine that light on who is excluded and why are they excluded. Because I think the solutions will come with time, and the solutions will be messy, and there'll be innovation, and there'll be experimentation, and there will be solutions in the future that we can't even imagine right now, are feasible and possible. So really my call to action would be to view it as an opportunity when we find a use case that's not being met, or an excluded, segment that can empower themselves through the use of financial services. That would be my plea, if you will, to all of you here.
Definitely, and when you mention kind of who is excluded, why, think about those intersections. And so the Indonesia Coalition has been looking at not only women, but women with disabilities, right? What's that next level that's preventing people from accessing and using? And so I know the policymakers in Indonesia, OJK, which is one of the regulating bodies, they are now taking one of their flagship programs for the next year, for this year, 2024, will be on ensuring that financial service providers are inclusive in their design and the delivery of financial services to women to people with disabilities. So it's great to think about all those intersections and who is excluded and why. So I'd like to welcome Pak Erdi, who is the Director of Financial Inclusion and Sharia Finance for the Coordinating Ministry of Economic Affairs in Indonesia. Thank you.
We have presidential decree. So my president is the leader of National Council of Financial Inclusion, and the coordinating ministry for economic affairs is the daily leader for the council. And this is the important pillar of the national strategy of financial inclusion. We have 5 pillars. Number 1 is financial education, and then 2 is community property right for collateral credit, and then financial intermediary facilities distribution channel, actually is a branchless agent of banks and non-banks institution, and then financial service at the government sector, like subsidy and capital injection to the institution financial and customer protection. And then in the foundation, we in Secretary of the National Council and support by information and communication technology and all in National Council in Indonesia, we have 7 working group. Number one is a working group of education, and the number 2 working group of the empowering, number 3 working group of the branchless bank or non-bank, and then government subsidy and inject capital and protection of the customer and the advocacy of the regulation and technology, information technology. And in this slide, we can see in the National Council, we about 27 institution, ministry, and where is the central bank? Central bank is the vice daily chairman in the left, and in the right is the daily chairman of the vice daily chairman is the financial supervision authority. In Indonesia, we have Bank Sentral, Central Bank, and OJK, or Financial Authority Service. And here we can see 24 ministry, like coordinating minister for the maritime and investment affair, and then coordinating ministry for the human development and the culture affair, coordinating ministry for political, legal, and security affairs, Ministry of the State Secretariat, Cabinet Secretary, Head of Presidential Staff, Minister of Finance, Chief Minister for Chairperson of the National Development Planning Agency, Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of the Agrarian Affairs and Spatial Planning, Ministry of the Communication and Information, and so on. We have every duty in every minister. And in this slide, we can see we built the Women's Digital Financial Inclusion Advocacy Hub. The technical ministry is the Ministry of Women as the member, as the sectoral leader, and the advocacy hub is supported by about 5 ministers. Number 1 is Minister of the Finance, and the Minister of the Planning, and the Minister of the Cooperative, and the Minister of the Home Affairs, and Minister of the Youth and Sport. And we make the National Strategy Financial Inclusion for Women. And in the strategy, we have 7 programs: education for women, and then empowering women, and then number 3 is the women branchless agents, and then number 4 is the subsidy and inject capital for the state-owned company, cooperative, to the woman client, and then customer protection, and then we make regulation advocacy, and we support the infrastructure technology informasi in the rural area. If in the cluster we have no good signal in the telecommunication or internet banking, we build the BTS, BTS is bandwidth telecom service, and we propose to the Ministry of Technology Information. Yes, and Minister regulation is the umbrella of the Women's Digital Financial Inclusion Hub in Indonesia. And then here the priority segment in our National Council, number one is migrant worker. So migrant worker, majority is the woman, yeah. And then community group with the social welfare problems like disabilities, and then ex-prostitutes, and then ex-prisoners, and etc. And then people in the disadvantaged region, and youth and student. But in this segment is not dichotomy, but we can see in this segment we have to make intersection, because in the women segment is so related with the youth and student, yeah, like young woman entrepreneur. And then in this slide we can see, yeah, we support by women with banking. Still, we established into 2016 by making the presidential decree. We can see in this slide by collaboration between Sekretariat DNKI, kemudian working group, and partner like Women Smart Banking, we can achieve the target, the level of financial inclusion in last year, 2023, is the 88.7, and the target is the 88% by usage. Yeah, in Indonesia, not all the ownership use the ownership itself to use the account, but maybe the older use the account, the younger, the family, in the family. And the by ownership, we show achieve the target 76.3% from the target 76%. And then here we have the obstacle, the level financial inclusion between men and women is there are gap. Men is higher than women, but the level of literation, women more than men in Indonesia. Yeah, maybe because many program education we give to the cluster of the women and community. And here is the program that we can achieve in every working groups. Yeah, as I said before, we have 7 working groups. Yeah, financial education, community property rights, financial intermediary, facilities and distribution channel, financial service in the government sector, customer protection, policies and regulation, and infrastructure and financial information technology. We synergize 27 ministry or institution, and the logo is in the slide. Yeah, this slide is explain about Aisyah. Yeah, maybe Ibu Arifa can add explanation about the collaboration. And the last is the PNM Mekar, as I shared before, yeah, as the largest women lending group in the world. Thank you.
I'd like to welcome Martha Hailemariam, Senior Advisor from Financial Institution Supervision at the National Bank of Ethiopia, who will present on the national financial inclusion policies of the central bank with a focus on mobile money solutions. Thank you and welcome, Martha.
Thank you and welcome all. And there are many countries here visiting Ethiopia, the land of origin, and welcome home, I would say. Thank you. And thank you to invite me to present this the Women Digital Financial Inclusion Hub. So let's start. My presentation is sharing experience of Ethiopia women financial inclusion. Here I divide session into 4. One is an introduction, which is overview of the data that we have currently, and next is the financial inclusion level, and there's a gender gap, which currently we have in other country relation to other countries, and also the Ethiopians women digital financial inclusion, and next which provide to the women financial inclusion strategy like national digital financial payment strategy and also national financial inclusion strategy, which contribute to the women financial inclusion. When it starts with the introduction, it is a gender gap currently. Previously, we have 19% point in 2017. Now it's 2021. It will become 16% point, showing it is an improvement of adoption of financial inclusion. And this is the regulations that we have paved the way for the significant development of financial inclusion. Currently, we have also 90 million mobile money accounts, the digital financial service. It is, I think, the December data, which more than 35% is the saving account, and also 12.5 million women, which is 14% of women using these digital financial services. Around 37 million digital financial service accounts are owned by women. It's among 22.2% share, which the total was 168.3 million DFS, like mobile money, mobile banking, internet banking, and also digital cards. When we see the financial inclusion level index data 2021, you see that even if we are latecomer, we are among large countries, which middle of in 2017, like we are 37%, but now 46%. When we see also the gender gap, we have 60% now, which is 55 with men, 39 is women's. The Ethiopian women's digital finance, when we see the enabling strategies and regulations, we start 2016, the financial inclusion strategy, which lasts up 2021. Previously, we show the slides of the FINDEX. It was 2016 and also 2021. So the DFS and agent banking. Following this strategy, we follow the DFS and agent banking included in our proclamation, banking proclamation, in 2019. And also issued the payment instrument issuer and payment system operator directive, use of agent directive, like the CGAP person saying that it's an infrastructure that we are going to benefiting women to use these digital finance services. So came in the Digital Ethiopian 2025. This is the country vision and action to drive digitization of the country to achieve financial inclusion. We follow this, and with the help of UNCDF, BTCA, Better Than Cash Alliance, and the Boston Consulting Group. Together, we established National Digital Payment Strategy 2021 to 2024, and the objective is the cash-light and financial inclusion economy. So in the strategy, we have 4 pillars. One is the infrastructure, the other is adoption of digital payments, the other is, the third is regulatory and oversight and innovation. Under this pillar, we have 32 actions. When we come to specific action which concern the 2 women, we are an action to implement capture sex disaggregate data, which inform and are responsible for intentional decision making. So the policymakers will come up with a policy intervention to create an enabling environment over financial inclusion, women financial inclusion in particular. So when we see the implementation framework, the responsible institutions which implement 32 actions are, the main is National Bank. Under National Bank, we have financial institutions cluster, which under our cluster, including the payments settlement system, foreign exchange and reserve management, IT and financial inclusion secretariat is under the National Bank of Ethiopia. The other is government institutions like MINT, Ministry of Innovation and Technology, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Culture and Tourism, and also INSA, and also ISA, which is network administrator, and also the Ethiopian Commission Authority, which is a supervisor of telecom. The private sectors like financial service providers like banks, payment instrument issuer, which is mobile operators, and also payment system operators. The development partners, which is joining to implement this framework, is Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the FSD Ethiopia, UNCDF, UNDP, World Bank Group. These are the implementer together with support this strategy. The actions teams are 14, composed from the responsible institutions which listed above, including the National Bank. The governance structure, when you see the council is the top, financial inclusion, and the steering committee, which is chaired by the vice governor of the financial institution supervision under the National Bank, and the secretary of this steering committee is the financial institutions council at the National Bank of Ethiopia. When we see the highlight of the National Financial Inclusion Strategy, the mission is to ensure 70% of adults are included by 2025. Special approaches are defined for extreme underserved, leveraging for women especially, who face unique and significant barrier to inclusion. When we see the demand side to target half of the gender gap in account ownership from its current estimation 19%, it was, I think, 19 was when we have a national financial inclusion starting 2026. Now it's 10 point by 2025, which is a target for the demand side. Specific actions that we have now implemented together is this, I think, top, and time is now over. So when we see the current target versus achievement, we see the volume of digital payment also greater than what we have targeted, and also the value also is above our target, and also number of transactions and number of access points also over the target points.
And I would like to turn it over to Lillian Tan, Senior Program Officer for Women's Economic Empowerment and Financial Inclusion at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, to close us out, and then we will see you at lunch. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin. And also a huge thank you to the Women's World Banking and UNCDF teams for hosting today, as well as for bringing together our fabulous panelists and speakers representing global, regional, and local perspectives. It has been such a pleasure today to hear these vital perspectives from the Women's Digital Financial Inclusion Advocacy Hub, and from our Ethiopia and Indonesia coalition members, some of whom have traveled quite a far way to come here today, so thank you. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is committed to a world in which women have full financial inclusion. We believe that when women have access to and use a full range of quality financial services, and very importantly, trust those services, find value in them, and can use them safely and confidently on their own, they will be on the path to greater economic power. And that's what this conversation is really about today, that enabling foundational, that financial inclusion in order to lead to that greater empowerment. My team at the Gates Foundation, which is the Inclusive Financial Systems team, has been supporting the Women's Digital Financial Inclusion Advocacy Hub since 2021, and has partnered with Women's World Banking and UNCDF to launch and develop those hubs. I'm also joined in spirit today by some other colleagues, so much like this effort is a coalition at the Gates Foundation and on my team, it's a coalition with some other colleagues as well. So I just want to mention them, and they do send their regards and respect, but could not be here physically today. And that's Dion Woods-Bell, who leads our work on program advocacy, policy, and communications, Brooke Patterson, our Indonesia country lead, and Edem Tsagaye, who's our Ethiopia country lead. So that's an internal coalition to bring together this global, local, and regional coalition here with us today. And just to share some of the impetus around why we felt a need to support this coalition, is that we saw conversations happening around women's financial inclusion at the global, regional, and local levels. And we saw a need to bring all of those conversations together, and very importantly, to inspire the collaboration that we're hearing today. Importantly, we also wanted to include the voices of civil society organizations and the women they represent into that conversation so that women are at the center of the advocacy and policy change that we're speaking about today. I've had the fortune of visiting and seeing our Indonesia hub, our Ethiopia hub, and our global hub in action, and really seen the power that comes together when we bring all of the diverse coalition members and actors together. Today's event was part of the Advocacy Hub's campaign called Accelerating Gender Equality with Digital Financial Services, which is meant to generate broader awareness around how gender-intentional digital financial solutions can accelerate equality, especially for women MSMEs. Practitioners worldwide are leaving $1.7 trillion on the table, representing the financing gap for women entrepreneurs. And that's just an estimate. Digital financial products, services, and programs that meet the specific needs of women are crucial to kickstart and grow their business. And as you've heard today, and for those of you who are joining through the rest of the week, we'll continue to hear, collective action and meaningful collaboration across all stakeholder groups, regulators, financial service providers, investors, civil society organizations, policymakers, are all instrumental to advancing women's digital financial inclusion. So there are many actions that can be taken, but I'll leave you just with a few calls to action as we wrap up today. And that first call to action is for financial service providers in the room. And that's really to understand that women and women MSMEs have unique needs, financial goals, and aspirations. And it's crucial to understand the context-specific barriers and opportunities that women face in accessing and using digital financial services. So really thinking about designing appropriate and affordable digital products and services for women based on their needs and experiences, and in ways that they can safely access and build trust in the formal financial system. The second call to action is for the policymakers in the room, and that's to design policies with specific time-bound targets to increase the digital and financial inclusion of women-led MSMEs, and especially, as we've heard from our opening remarks and throughout the day, to really build that into a national financial inclusion framework and digital inclusion strategies. And really, alongside that, as we've heard, along with social norms and digital capabilities, really building digital financial capability to support women's access and use of those financial services. And finally, my third call to action is for our civil society organizations in the room. and that's to continue to partner and provide guidance to policymakers and financial service providers on the needs of women entrepreneurs and to ensure those measurable targets are established, implemented, and met for women's financial inclusion, and to encourage the use of your own gender disaggregated data and insights in your own work. And with all of that said, I just want to thank everyone in the room for being here today and for being engaged with our speaker and panelists. And wanted to mention that this concludes our program for this afternoon. A recording of this session will be shared on the WDFI Advocacy Hub's website. And again, thank you to our fabulous hosts for hosting us here today, and for the speakers who have flown in, many of whom are local, but then many of whom have flown in from other parts of the world.